Do you feel any sense of vindication by what's been revealed in this report?
No, in a sense, because it's still something that we've been talking about for the past 13 years, and people have known about this. Now that I guess that the US administration has admitted it, I welcome that, but what doesn't happen is accountability. And what doesn't happen, which your report mentioned that they went beyond the advice, the legal advice, that's actually not true. The most senior legal advisors to the Bush administration, which included the Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and his Undersecretary Jay Bybee, actually said that for something to constitute torture, it must include organ failure or death. Otherwise, it's not torture. Now, when that is passed down and trickled down to the people at the bottom who are executing the orders of those people in power, then it's quite easy to interpret that as an open-door policy for torture. And that's precisely what happened when I was held in the Bagram detention facility, when guns were put to my head, when I was kicked and punched on the floor and my clothes were sliced off with a knife by US soldiers, when the CIA threatened to send me either to Egypt or to Syria under Assad to be tortured further. So none of this has been really addressed in that sense. And the part of the outsourcing of the torture, the fact that countries like Syria, like Egypt and Gaddafi's Libya were places where Britain and the United States of America were sending people to be tortured. So it wasn't just the CIA doing it by themselves. They couldn't have done it by themselves. There had to be lots of accomplices, and there are, I believe, 54 countries that took part in it. So essentially what they did was to set a precedent for these countries to follow, and that's precisely what's been going on. And if we look at what's happening in Iraq right now, in fact, ISIS, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was born out of the dungeons of Abu Ghraib, where these torture methods were being implemented and then solidified by the regimes that took over. And that's why we are here seeing people dressed in orange suits, for example, being executed. It's a direct response to the brutal torture that took place in places like Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, Bagram, Kandahar, and the secret detention sites.
Is it not important, though, that now, from the President down and from the Senate, they are saying, yes, we did this, it is wrong, and therefore making that pledge that they won't do it again in future?
Well, here's a question. If I was to take somebody from the street and falsely imprison them, beat them and torture them, I would be prosecuted by the police for that crime. So it doesn't make sense that just because people are working for the government, for the US government, that they are somehow immune for this. In fact, there should be a higher authority. They're talking about the moral high ground. Well, the moral high ground can only be taken once you hold yourself to account. If you can't do that, then there's no sense in simply just doing this confession in public and saying we confess, but really we're not subject to the law like everybody else. And there's a double standard here, and that is that those in power, the CIA and everybody else, there are other people who were involved in this, by the way. The FBI were involved, and so was military intelligence and the US military in general. They were all involved in this torture program. The CIA couldn't do this by itself, and this is something that we're missing. And in fact, the British intelligence services itself, as we know, were quite complicit in some of these cases, in the Libyan cases, in the Guantanamo cases, in numerous cases around the world. So there is a lot more to uncover, and if we want to be honest, if we really want to get a proper answer to all of this, then I'm afraid there have to be prosecutions.
Have you had a chance to look or find out what the report says about British involvement or British complicity in this?
No, I've not seen anything that mentions British complicity, but I'm completely aware that this is something that made Cameron's government itself try to make a priority. They ordered the Peter Gibson inquiry into British complicity in torture. There's an unprecedented police investigation of the MI5 and its complicity in torture. These things haven't got very far. We don't know where they are at the moment, but what should happen is that they should be pursued, and we have the right, the public has the right to know exactly what the British government was doing in relation to this crime, because let's not forget, torture is a crime, kidnap is a crime, false imprisonment is a crime, and nobody should be immune from it.
Finally, how far do you think that intelligence agencies or police security authorities ought to be allowed to go in questioning suspects if they genuinely believe that there is a threat to national security?
Well, the proof is this, that the report says that not one single case of torture led to any actionable evidence that showed lives could be saved by it. In fact, we have the case of Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi, a man who was held in the Bagram detention facility. He was interrogated by the CIA, the same agents who interrogated me. They said, if you don't cooperate, we'll do to you what we did to this man. This man was sent to Egypt. He was tortured, and he gave the Americans a false testimony that al-Qaeda was working with Saddam Hussein on obtaining weapons of mass destruction. This evidence was taken by Colin Powell to the UN Security Council in 2003, and then they argued for a case of war in Iraq. As a result of that war, we saw the rise of al-Qaeda in Iraq, which didn't exist before that, and then the rise of Islamic State in Iraq, and eventually IS. And so we can see the trajectory that led to this torture just produced more bad evidence, and we act on it, and therefore there's a very black page in history as a result of this. And without prosecutions, without accountability, I can't see how we can move forward. You can't turn over the page until you look at what's on the page.